Hi, I'm Carole Robinson. Welcome to this edition of County Happenings, where we find out what's happening in the county from the leader of our county, County Mayor Rogers Anderson.
How are you today?
I'm doing great.
I understand that you are a grandmother again.
Again, another Mimi.
And now we have all blue babies?
All blue babies. We
All
have a
blue
very
boys.
active family.
All boys. That's
Yes.
great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's
And so if people look at your eyes this morning,
they're going to see blue
They're going to see-
and surrounded by red.
you've been taking care of two of them while Mommy is trying to take care of one in the hospital.
Exactly. I think she got the better deal. A 3-year-old and a 17-month-old.
Congratulations.
But it's been fun. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, I, as a personal note, you never know, and I know people that watch this show we're not going to get into comparing grandbabies as grandparents.
No.
But you just don't know how much you love those grandbabies until they get here, and how they can just tear your heart apart.
Oh my gosh.
And the one-liners are wonderful.
Oh yeah, I
But-
was just telling you that one-liner earlier today, just before the show started. Mimi, you know I love you. Oh my God.
It's tough. Well, lots of, speaking of a new baby for you, we have lots of new folks continue to move into Williamson County. I saw some numbers the other day that it just increases the whole conversation of growth and having zoning and growth management plans in place, which we do all over the county and the cities, and some interesting things, as you know, have happened at the legislators on the annexation.
Yeah, you're and that was a concern. That was something that was affecting both the city and the county when they put the hold on it. And the question was whether they were going to, when they did their study, what were they going to find?
Let's go back and kind of talk about it. In the late 90s, many cities across the state of Tennessee would annex or go out and seek places that had commercial development, and the reason they were doing that was to get the sales tax off of that. Mm-hmm. The way the law reads now, if the business is in the city limits, half of that sales tax goes to the city of record, and the other half goes to education in some form, to the state or to the local level. So there was an advantage for the cities to annex, but oftentimes those lines would go parallel to that road or next to the creek to attach onto that piece of property, which is the sales tax. Now there were other examples too. Maybe the city wanted to extend services for a new subdivision. So in the late 90s, the legislators in their infinite wisdom said, okay, we're getting all these complaints, we're getting all these issues out there. Let's come up with a thing we call the urban growth boundaries. And that required cities and counties in the late 90s to sit down and define, and you had to tell the counties where you anticipated growing. You just could no longer, oh, by the way, run down the street. Mm-hmm. You had to have a systematic approach to annexing land. And
did the county have any say in their systematic plan?
They did. The laws specifically said you had to have all of your city representation there, your elected officials as well as your planning staff. Mm-hmm. The county likewise. You had to have a representative from the agricultural community. You had to have business there. There was some approximately 24 people that sat at this table and made this determination. And you tried to do it on rivers and roads, and not just isolate one particular area you thought you might do. Because it also said in that law, we're going to do this for 20 years, and for the next 20 years, we'd ask that let's try to work through these without changing the law again. And for the first 15 years, that worked.
Almost made it.
Almost made it. And for the most part, cities and counties worked with each other. There was two parts to the annexation bill. Once this was voted on, your plan had to be submitted to the state. The state put it on record so that everybody knew where growth was going to occur. During those discussions and meetings in the late 90s, many large tracts of land or pieces of land, probably the people didn't know about it. Mm-hmm. Those lines were drawn, they were laid out, and in some future date, either the cities, any of the cities would say, well, we're going to go out into this area. Some people would oppose it, Some people would like it. If you owned a large tract of land to a major thoroughfare and you hooked it right next to a city, your land would probably skyrocket in value if you wanted to sell it. If you didn't want to sell it,
Pay the taxes.
that's right. You were out of the loop. You couldn't stay out of it because in the late 90s, these people had voted on cities and counties and state and
Now,
said, that's it.
Was anybody that was kind of on the border or included in this new urban growth, like the farms or landowners, were they notified that they were included in that
They
urban
were
growth?
supposed to be notified, Carol. They were supposed to have some input, and some that, as you know, in any public meeting, there's always somebody that doesn't show up or give you your opinion. But at the end of the day, the decision, the vote was taken. Now that's the whole debate of what's occurring today, is did those property owners know, or did they, when they bought that land in the last 15 years, did they know that that was in the urban growth boundaries? Some people probably didn't care. They got some extended services, sewer, water, police, garbage pickup, depending on what city you were in. But other people clearly said that's almost like a taking without a vote, and property rights is a strong issue in this state,
Yes, it
and
is.
particularly this county. That I don't have the right as the elected official to take your land unless you want to sign off on it or tell me or come to me. So for many years, as the cities would annex all this land, most of the time those issues were worked out. Not always. We've got several issues in Williamson County. People say, I do not want to be in the city limits.
Work around me.
Work around me. Well, that drove cities crazy with headaches because they had to run those lines around and through in different ways. But that's what those residents wanted. So all this erupted in 2013. That in other parts of the states, it was a war almost going on between cities and counties. And so the legislators said, let's take a year and let's get this before an organization that looks at these issues, and let's weigh the pros and the cons, and let's see if we can't come back with some consensus on how we should fix this problem.
And just in 1 minute there, when a city annexes property into their urban growth plan
Or city limits.
or city limits, the county no longer has anything to do. So the county has lost tax revenue from that.
Well, the property tax, it doesn't matter if you're in the city or the county, I'm going to receive the property taxes.
Okay.
What you do lose would be the future revenue. But if you had a business, and we don't have many businesses that are in the unincorporated of Williamson County, that and that's because we don't have public sewer. We have septic tanks for the most part in the unincorporated area. But if that city went out and attached on to a piece of commercial property that you were receiving, remember, you get half of the sales tax,
Right.
and the other half goes to public education. Well, if the city annexed it, all of a sudden it went over to the city, and yes, we would lose it. But realistically, we probably, and I know this sounds corny to say, we won't get $1 million a year off of commercial development because we just don't have that many mom and pop stores. Leaper's Fork and Grassland, out on Henpeck Lane, a few of those, but that's it. The rest of it is residential homes. So the legislators now have come back and said, and it was a great debate this last year from 2013 to this time. It's going through subcommittees, and what's going to happen, it looks like, if it goes through, that every time the city wants to go outside, inside the urban boundary or outside the urban growth boundary lines, that they're going to have the consensus of those property owners, but they just can't do it without their involvement. I think that would make a whole bunch of people happy that own land, that they can actually have a say-so. Conversely, you know, you've got into these issues that if I'm the city limits and I'm right up next to yours, do you have to spend a lot of money through an election process?
Just for one property.
Can they just sign off?
Yeah.
That would seem to be common sense, but we all know sometimes common sense goes by the wayside on and who owns that land.
Right.
And you could say yes to yours, maybe you're trying to sell the land and somebody else buys the land before the vote gets there, and it could. I mean, there's issues here that have repercussions. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying they're good. I'm just saying the law's changing.
The details still have to be worked out.
That's right.
But they're working on it.
They are working on it, and I guess at the end of the day, remember in the early conversations, the legislators put it in and said you got 20 years. 20 years. Nobody has addressed what happens after 20 years. Well, 20 years will be here in 5 or 6 more years. And
so their decision may be also by the wayside in 20 years.
That's right. Till they're willing to tackle what happens out into the future. I'd say people here in Williamson County would have mixed opinions on that. If you happen to live in an area and you were trying to preserve it, historical overlays and et cetera, you didn't want any more traffic, you'd be all in favor to stop the growth. The other side of it is the cities, for them to survive and maintain and continue to prosper the way they did, they've got to have the annexation for these new businesses, new jobs, new residents that are moving into our community.
A lot of people who moved here 20 years ago were in the middle of nowhere.
Absolutely.
Now they're butting right up to the city limits.
Great example of that. 20 years ago, there was no Cool Springs Mall.
Right.
Well, I shouldn't say 20.
That. I remember.
Yeah, in the 90s, it was just going.
Just going.
But these conversations started in about the time the Cool Springs Mall, and because of that growth. Goose Creek, if you haven't been to Goose Creek lately, area,
oh my God,
it's huge, and none of that has been occurred, and that's all occurred in the last 20 years.
I remember when they were discussing, the big discussion was widening of 65. Why do we have to do that? And then all of a sudden, boom, this is why.
Yeah. But you know, that's up on the hill. That will affect everyone in Williamson County one way or the other. Even if you live in a subdivision or you live on a large plantation, that will have an effect on Williamson County for years to come. And so there's a lot of discussion and debate on that.
And at what point can the city stop annexing? And I mean, it appears that if a city keeps annexing and annexing, a county can end up being a metro.
Yeah, I think I saw some statistics recently that less than 50% of our total county land, or over 50% of our total land mass, is still undeveloped.
Okay. And I think that's important for the people to know, because most people, all they see is Franklin, Brentwood, Spring Hill.
Yeah.
They don't see east or west of
College Road, Bethesda,
Fairview,
Leapers Fork, all of that land. There's a lot of land. Now, I'm not recommending that we annex all
No.
because I think one of the things we've talked about.
But we still have
land.
them hills.
Yes.
Excuse my English. We still have
the hollers.
The hollows, the hollers, and we still have the open fields and forested areas.
And every piece of land that you have doesn't need to be a subdivision. We need to remember and respect the agriculture, the way of life. We're spending a great deal of money now teaching the next generation. That's the generation under us, by the way.
It's not my 3-year-old grandson.
How to farm, how to raise things. And most of us, if we've got gray hair in our head, we did grow up in an environment that we had to help produce products off the land we own. Now, not that I like hoeing corn or picking strawberries or beans, and you know, it's funny, when I was a boy growing up, I couldn't wait to leave home. Go buy me some. When I settled down, I wasn't going to have a garden. The first thing I did after we got married is put a garden in, and it's been that way ever since.
When you got your hands in the dirt, you got your hands in the dirt.
I love it, and but you know, I couldn't make a living at it. But I think it's important that we all know that. I think that's one of the reasons our Williamson County Fair does so good. We really emphasize over the last 9 fairs. This is the 10th one.
Fair, yes.
That you know, we really blend agricultural. The livestock side, the agriculture, the beans and the crops are there, and there's probably a lot of people in Williamson County have never done that, and so they take interest in that, and particularly Little Ones Farming that's put on by the 4-H folks and the extension.
Yeah, and that little farmyard where the kids can go and touch the animals. And
that's so important that we continue providing that educational piece, because as you and I get older and we get more inactive in our community lifestyle, that it is important somebody else steps up and teaches and shows and demonstrates.
And what I think is really important too is that there's been a lot of changes from the time when you and I were out in the backyard hoeing and pulling weeds and stuff to now where there's just a whole new way of farming.
Oh yeah, I mean, we didn't have a big farm, and Daddy always had the garden tore up, but today's farm, if you go out on Del Rio Pike on the way where I live out in the county side, and when they get ready to plant the corns and the beans, they don't tear that field up. They row crop it.
Yeah, which is unheard of in our day. You had to get that stuff plowed right under.
This time of the year, you were tilling the soil. You were fertilizing it, which there's not a lot of fertilizing because all that fertilizer, when it rained, washed off, got into the creeks, and it was EPA. I mean, it's just a different way that we farm today, but I look at...
of course, our fertilizer came from the barn.
I understand. I understand. I just was using the word fertilizer. But you talk about the way we farm, the equipment we did, everything is generational. I know I've heard my mom and dad talking about working in some heavy agricultural environment that even children went out and worked in those hot days. I can honestly say growing up, we had chores to do, had things to do, but there was a common...
There was time to play too.
Yeah, there was time to play.
Yeah.
Other things going on, I think it's important to talk about Columbia State Community College.
Yeah, Governor made a big announcement. If you haven't heard, Columbia State, they're going to be moving dirt come this spring sometime. And they've got the money for the architecture drawings to be made. They've got the, what do you call the schematic, the picture of what it's going to be, but now they're going to get all the
well, it's been they tell me a 13-year journey to improve.
Back to Dr. Rebecca Hawkins.
Yes.
Do you remember her?
I remember well.
Gosh.
I remember the past mayor, and I guess that'd be the third past mayor, Franklin, and I on a panel discussion talking about a center for higher education. And in other words, we need something in Williamson County.
Right.
And that conversation has kept going. Columbia State currently is, as you go over to the Animal Control and Adoption Center in front of Franklin High School, it's the old vocational building that the county owned it once and sold it to the state. The state owned it, sold it back to us, and we sold it back to them again for different functions.
Right.
And that building is it's sturdy. It's just, but it's not modern by any means.
It's an old school. It's an old VOTEC building with garages but that's been transformed as best they could with minimal dollar input.
And it shows.
Yes.
And that campus, the Williamson County campus of Columbia State, is one of the fastest growing community college campuses in the entire state. Now, there are many different community colleges throughout the state of Tennessee, but the money was secured. The legislators have not voted on it to build a brand new campus over off of McEwen.
The land was purchased last year.
A couple of years ago.
Oh, yes.
And so now the next step is start pushing the dirt, as you said, and hopefully they'll be pushing the dirt, depending on how long the legislators stay in session. But once they vote it, and chances are they're going to vote it up, and the governor signs that the money's available, and Columbia State has been doing a lot of preparation for this day. It was a matter that it was hoping last year they didn't get it. This year they got it. And Vol State up in Gallatin was another one that was a recipient of, and some of the other schools around. So it's a 2-year window. So this is 2014, hopefully 2016, maybe the fall classes, certainly winter classes, that Columbia State will have a new campus to address a lot of the needs that they need to address. Interesting.
And what I think is really good about this is the kids that are currently going to Columbia State, it's for them, I mean, once they walk inside the building, they're in a college. but it's still a high school environment. And these kids have graduated from high school. They need to begin the growing up process, but they still feel like they're in a high school environment. Where they're going to be moving to now, when the buildings are built, now they are college students.
And from our perspective, the reason we're touching on some of these regional issues this morning, as specifically things we're doing in the city or county, is we do have several colleges that are represented here in Williamson County. David Lipscomb, Belmont, I'm afraid I'm going to miss some. Lee is here now. There are King colleges here now. There's a whole bunch of colleges represented here, but their area of specialty in different areas. But it is critical for our as parents and grandparents, that our children continue to have a way to go to school without absolutely breaking the bank when you go to a four-year college.
Yeah.
Now, there are some children that will never go to the Columbia States or the community college. But then on top of this announcement, the governor makes the announcement, again, it's not law yet, that says that if you graduate from a from a school in the state of Tennessee, they're trying to fund the freshman and the sophomore year at a community school or a technical school.
Right.
Not everyone's going to go to college. So, as of today's show, I can't tell you if that's law, but that has implications.
On the four-year schools,
On the
are
4
they going to
years.
lose their junior and senior, freshman and sophomore classes, as well as by doing that, can the community colleges hold all these students?
Well, and the funding mechanisms, you go back, has it been 10 years since the lottery was put in? I think it's about that. And the lottery that was put in across
It was after my kids graduated.
yeah, I remember. I do too. But after the lottery was put in, those funds that are building up in there help to offset some of the costs for the children that want to go to schools, and specifically state schools.
Right.
There were a few exceptions. I think Old Moore, you can go to Old Moore here in town and get some of the lottery money for that. But currently, freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors get a X amount of dollars, have to maintain a great GPA, a grade point average, et cetera, et cetera. There's several criteria.
Yeah, they can't just, it's not handed to them, they have to earn it.
And then at the end of that school, they're either eligible or not eligible for the next stepping stone of a sophomore or junior year. Well, part of this proposal under this new free college for technical and or community colleges to do away with that funding for the freshman, sophomore at the 4-year. If they go here, we're going to take that money away, but we'll put more money in on your junior and senior year. So that's part of that process. I think the governor, I haven't talked to him. He didn't ask my opinion, but I'll give it to you and the people watching.
He's going to get it eventually.
Is that he is weighing those $5,000 per student at all the schools to help fund some of the colleges. The other piece of this free education proposal that's out there for the first 2 years to our community colleges is that funding is not taken away from public education in the K through 12 grades. It's coming out of the lottery surplus or fund balance. Well, that's just sparked a whole different kind of conversation. In that fund balance, when they first started, I think they gave $2,000. Now they're up to $4 or $5 or whatever. Well, the proponents of public education going to higher ed are saying, well, you're cutting us out over here, you're putting it over here, and so it's just an interesting phenomena how all this debate is going. But the bottom line,
Peter to pay Paul.
But at the end of the day, they're trying to find a way to make the proposal that our next generation people have technical qualifications and a higher skill set, because what we're hearing, and I hear it too, that from the job market, there's not enough qualified workers to step right into these jobs. Now, we all know that to get into the nursing, you've got to go through some training.
Right.
And to either be an LPN or be a LP or to just be a nurse practitioner or a nurse, It's a whole curriculum of courses, and I want that when they're working on me. And the same could be said for that other employer that's running the machine shop or whatever arrangements they are. Our workforce is woefully behind throughout the United States, and the governor's proposal is to have, I think it's called Drive 55, and it's to have 55% of our population with a 2-year certification by the year 2025. And that's a very aggressive and ambitious goal.
And that goal, but that goal needs to start in the lower levels, in the high schools, in the middle schools, where you capture the kids that have those interests and start giving them opportunities then, which Williamson County is doing a great job in a lot of areas doing that. But across the state, I think that you can't just drop into a college and say, I want to be a nurse and not have any biology or anything like that.
That's correct. You know, we in Williamson County, we're very fortunate. Over 50% of our population has a BS degree.
Right.
And with 2 years, we get up into the high 50s. That's not true across the rest of the state.
No, it's not.
We have a very, very educated
We have an
group of
educated
people that live in
populace,
this county.
and therefore the demands on public schools and the private schools is very high in this county.
But that's not true in some of the other
Exactly.
areas.
And so you've got to start there, in my opinion, in order to get those kids to even want to go. Well, the problem I see is that they're going to get in there after one semester, it's not their job, their thing, or whatever, which is what a lot of times kids do.
Yeah, again, I'm editorializing. When I was a boy growing up, you walked in the footsteps of your dad.
Right.
And you knew a whole bunch of things you didn't want to do. You didn't know what you wanted to do. So some of us wound up in the military, and they kind of, they trued you down, I call it. They trimmed you down more ways than one. And, you know, when you got through, you were, particularly boys, particularly males, and maybe I'm being a little bit chauvinistic here, but I think oftentimes girls, young ladies, they're more focused. They know what they want to do. They know what they want out.
Boys just need a little bit more time to grow up.
I would definitely agree with that, having two of them. But you know, sometimes our boys do not mature enough when they get out of high school, and they're just kind of floundering there. Or they go to school, but it's not for the right reason.
Exactly.
So I don't know. We'll see how this bakes out together over a period of time.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall during the debates.
I'm sure it is.
And we are almost done, but I want to say congratulations to Judge Kelly on the naming of the Fairview Gym after him.
At the rec center.
At the rec center in Fairview.
The gym he coached at for many years.
Yes, he
had
did.
Had some state district champion. Had a great ceremony yesterday. 75 to 100 people came out, and it's always good to see coaches and judges do good.
And thank you for joining us at County Happenings. We'll see you next time.
Want to build memories with your child? Turn off the TV and read. Reading is one of the best family activities around. It's free and without commercials. Start with picture books for young children and build to storybooks and novels. Vary the length and topic of what you're reading. And read slowly enough so that your child can draw pictures in his mind about what is being read. Invite your child to turn the book's pages, or pause and ask your child to predict what's going to happen next in the story.
Mom, where have you turned that car?
Young children like to read the same book over and over. During repeat readings, stop at a key word and let your child fill in that word.
Is that the burner bowl?
After you finish reading a book, reflect on it together. Build memories. Read. This Choose Success moment has been brought to you by the Middle Tennessee P16 Council.
Hi, I'm Sophia, and this is my book, Black Beauty. I chose this book because I really like the illustrations, and my favorite part is when Black Beauty finds a new owner and he gets hurt, but the owner takes good care of him. And you could find this book at school or at a store. Book Play!